part of Spence and why this fight has been delayed so long. And their plan, we've been talking about Al Heyman and how genius he is and so on and so forth. Well, your plan failed. Your plan failed. Spence, your plan failed. You thought you was going to stall out my man. You thought you was going to stall out Crawford. You thought you was going to catch him slipping. You literally thought you was going to catch him slipping. At the end of the day, you thought you was going to age him out. You thought you was going to let him run away. That's the problem. You waited too long, Spence. You waited too long. Al, you waited too long. You should have done this fight 3-4 years ago. You probably would have had a better chance of beating him. You would have had a way better chance of beating him. So your plan failed you. Your plan failed you, man. So that's just it. That's just it. They had a plan, and Spence alluded to it early when they met and in the backstage at a fight. When he's like, I'm gonna take care of what I got over here, and then I'm gonna finally fight you or whatever. That was a time when you was at your very, very best mentally, physically, and all that. You should have fought him then. And you waited to fight him later, and this is the outcome. This is what you get. No excuses. Everybody, all the Spence fans out there making excuses, weight drain, this, that, all that. It's a part of the game. It's a part of the game. What about the 4 or 5 years that Terrence had to wait for you to finally sign on the contract? What about that? What about all the ridicule and everything he went through because the fight didn't get made a couple of times or the first time? Talked about, name drugged through the mud. What about that? So no excuses. You got Spence being a man, standing on his own 2 feet, not making no excuses for this. No excuses. Your fans out there, the Earl Spence fans, and whatever they call themselves. I forget. It's like Earl. I mean, I've been seeing a whole lot of names. It's been funny, but anyways, y'all cannot make excuses for your man, bro. Stop making excuses for him, bro. It was fair game. Both these guys signed on the dotted line, and the best man won. And I'm gonna tell you this. Even if the fight happened 5 years ago, outcome was going to be the same. The outcome was going to be the same. And if you want to come at 154, the outcome is going to be the same. And I'm telling you this, because you're not going to. Spence is who he is.
The outcome 5 years ago being the same outcome that we saw 5 years later, the outcome being the same is likely why it took 5 years.
As much as they tried to discredit Terrence Crawford and drag his name through the mud the last 5 years, they knew underneath it all, they knew he was a greater threat to Errol than Mikey Garcia. Mikey certainly, Danny Garcia, Sean Porter.
I am in agreement with most anything and everything that Tim Bradley said in that video because it's all true and it can be fact-checked. It was Errol Spence Jr. himself that stated he wanted to clean up his side of the street first, delaying this fight, delaying it needlessly.
I think he would have stood a better chance. I think he would have performed better 5 years ago, but I think the outcome would have been the same.
Errol was almost gloating when him and Terrence first met backstage. They had their little confrontation immortalized now. Errol was almost gloating that Al Heyman gave him 4 names, and none of those names was the name of Terrence Crawford.
It's on video. There's nothing to argue about. Came out of Errol's mouth.
Be obtuse if you want. The rest of us know what we saw, we know what we heard, and we know that if this fight took 5 years to make, it's because of Errol Spence Jr., it's because of Al Heyman, it's because of the PBC. And in delaying the fight, that only made the beating that much worse.
And it was the PBC that delayed it, not Terrence Crawford, not his then promoter, Bob Arum. It was Errol Spence, it was the PBC.
This is what I'm saying.
I read it out.
This is what I'm saying. This is what I read it all too. Terrence Crawford, wait till he get a belt.
Yeah.
He ain't did nothing in the welterweight today.
You
When he
have
get
did
a belt,
nothing.
you want to
You
go
have
over
did
there. Keith Thurman want to go over there, and now y'all want to say, I ain't fought nobody, but I got a belt now, so why?
Okay. Sean Porter got a belt too.
So now
South Porter got a belt too. South Porter. So I,
It all speaks for itself. If you're one of those people that are looking to make excuses for Errol, saying that he was weight drained, well, he didn't have to be. He could have had this fight a long time ago. He chose to go along with the plan.
Not that you guys were complaining about his weight before the fight. Before the fight, you thought he was going to crush Terrence Crawford, so that when he doesn't, you can start talking about weight.
It's pathetic. It's fucking pathetic. And when Timothy Bradley says that their plan failed, it's because Errol deviated from the plan. I think he deserves that much respect. That if we got to see this fight and we got to see it play out, it's because of Errol.
Errol and Terrence, but it is because Errol deviated from the plan.
I saw Terrence Crawford say after the fight, I respect the hell out of Errol. This was never personal. I think the fans picking sides tried to make it personal, divide and conquer, two fighters going for the same goal. I never had any hatred towards Errol. I feel that Errol, in spite of the plan they had for him,
He's the one that deviated. They wanted him to move up in weight and take on Keith Thurman.
and if he had, the usual suspects would have went along with it, further alienating Terrence Crawford from the welterweight division and the biggest fights, the biggest names, continuing to freeze him out. They would have supported. Underneath it all, I don't think they wanted this fight to happen either. Errol's fans and Errol's team. But it's Errol himself that decided to go against the grain and go against the plan.
For that, he deserves respect.
It took him long enough to do it, and some doors had to close before this one opened. Lest we forget, after the Caleb Plant fight, they offered Canelo Alvarez the head of Errol Spence Jr. Could you imagine if Canelo would have accepted?
Would have had to scrape Errol out of the ring with a spatula.
These are not the ramblings of Ring IQ, the content creator. We got confirmation of this from none other than Tom Brown himself, who stated quite plainly they offered Canelo a multi-fight deal that included a Spence fight after the Plant fight. And if Canelo had accepted that fight with Errol Spence Jr., do you think he would have went on to fight Terrence Crawford?
No, he would have got knocked out and never came back down. He would have never came back down to welterweight.
It took for that door to close in order for this one to open, to where Errol was left with two options: fight Keith or finally fight Terrence Crawford.
Shouldn't be forgotten that they would have preferred to put Errol in the ring with Canelo than put him in the ring with Terrence Crawford. It shouldn't be forgotten that Tim Smith, the VP of Communications, said they didn't think this fight would sell. They didn't think people would buy it.
There's enough evidence right there that tells you it was not their plan to make this fight. And if we ended up getting it, it's because Errol deviated from the plan. So if anybody's plan failed here, it wasn't necessarily Errol's plan so much as Al Heyman's, because I'm sure Al would have preferred that Errol not get annihilated.
Errol deviated from the plan.
The plan was to keep Errol an unbeaten fighter, to put him in the ring with another PBC guy that ain't Terrence Crawford,
That was the plan.
to drag Terrence Crawford's name through the mud and continue to alienate him. That plan failed.
Tim is right.
And that was the plan.
Tim is right.
They basically try to blackball me. They start saying that the WBO wasn't considered a world championship. They wouldn't say my name on a broadcast. They was basically trying to outlaw me and basically just have the fans forget about me. You know? So if you look on the Showtime fights and stuff like that, they wouldn't consider me as a champion. They would only consider, Errol, Keith Thurman, and I think it was Danny Garcia at the time, or it was Danny Garcia. And so I felt like that was very disrespectful.
That disrespect should not be forgotten, as it's likely to continue in some way, shape, or form. Terrence Crawford, in that same interview, dismissed Jaron Ennis as a potential opponent. I'm looking for bigger and better opportunities, like Charlo.
Jermell Charlo, the current reigning undisputed junior middleweight champion, though not for long,
Set to take on Canelo Alvarez, 2 divisions north of junior middleweight. When asked about Jaron Ennis, Terrence Crawford said, that fight with Ennis can happen because we're in the same weight class, but at this point in time, I'm looking for bigger and better opportunities, like Charlo, Crawford said, referring to the undisputed junior middleweight champion.
it's not the first time Terrence Crawford has expressed an interest in moving up in weight and facing Jermell Charlo beyond a Spence fight.
He's been doing that for months. I think he's been doing that for a little over a year now.
Where it becomes disrespectful, where it can, is where The same people that picked Errol Spence Jr. to win ahead of this weekend's fight will now start gravitating towards Jaron Ennis. Will now soup him up to be some kind of a boogeyman because Terrence has bigger fish to fry.
Bigger fish like Jermell Charlo, who he said, "I gave him a little piece of my mind, you know what I mean?" Crawford said, "We've been going back and forth for some time, and I was in a moment. I just thought I'd let him know that I'm coming for him, too. I don't really care for dude." Crawford added, "I wouldn't say I don't like him, because I don't have no reason to not like him personally. I just don't care for him."
Before this past weekend's fight, Errol Spence Jr. said in plain English this would be his final fight at welterweight.
If Errol had won and then moved up in weight, if he had beaten Terrence Crawford the way Terrence's critics said he would, do you think they would have accused Errol of avoiding Jaron Ennis? He's been in the queue waiting for a shot at Errol for a long time, and I didn't see those people pressuring Errol to fight him.
So don't start now.
Timothy Bradley feels it's way too early for Ennis to face Crawford anyway. Who the hell has Boots fought?
You can expect many of the same people who picked Errol Spence Jr. to win this weekend's fight to start gravitating towards Jaron Ennis and making him out to be some kind of boogeyman, accusing Terrence of ducking him, the way they accused Terrence of ducking Errol.
Because they did accuse Terrence of ducking Errol for many years. You can expect that. Timothy Bradley said, "I respect Ennis, but who the hell has Boots fought?"
It's a valid question.
Now, I don't think Jaron Ennis has fought anybody as solid as, say, an Egis Kavaliauskas.
Nobody as high profile as a Sean Porter or an Errol Spence Jr.
Timothy Bradley, convinced that Ennis would be in for a rude awakening, stated, "You can be riding that wave. You've been getting all these knockouts of all these different guys, but you've never been in the ring with an animal like Terrence Crawford."
Ahead of this weekend's fight, I told you that both the winner and the loser of the match would be likely to move up to junior middleweight. The Jaron Ennis won't get either.
Terrence wants Jermell Charlo, certainly a more high-profile fighter, a more decorated fighter than Jaron Ennis.
So what's wrong with that?
Interestingly enough, the WBO have now ruled that Jermell Charlo will be stripped of his WBO junior middleweight title when the Canelo Alvarez fight starts on September 30th, with the interim belt holder Tszyu upgraded to become full champion. WBO will allow Charlo to be introduced as their champion on September 30th, so the Canelo fight can be billed as undisputed versus undisputed, but he will then immediately lose the belt for not fighting his overdue mandatory, knowing that the order to fight Tszyu.
That news came down well before he decided to fight Canelo. In fighting Canelo instead of fighting Tim, that is non-compliance. Non-compliance with a direct order.
Tszyu really wanted that fight. Tszyu wanted to fight Jermell, and so does Terrence Crawford. Problem is, Jermell's all the way up there at super middleweight at the moment.
To that, Tszyu, the WBO's interim champion, stated, "I'm willing to fight Crawford. Go ask him if he's ready." That's the real question.
Jermell is fighting Canelo, and win, lose, or draw, win, lose, or fall, how likely is it that he returns to junior middleweight after already having spent so much time there?
I don't think it's that likely at all.
As far as Errol Spence Jr. and his rematch clause, should Spence take a pass on a second fight, Crawford has already expressed an interest in moving up to junior middleweight to pursue more titles, and Tszyu is more than happy to face him. Go ask him if he's ready. That's the real question, Tszyu said to Fox Sports' Straya. To be mentioned as the next fight for the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world, that shows the level I'm at right now.
A Tszyu fight for Terrence Crawford is nothing to sneeze at, and whether the people in America want to admit it or not, a fight with Tszyu is a bigger money fight and a more meaningful fight for Terrence than a fight with Jaron Ennis. Jaron Ennis is not a champion. He doesn't have a title of any kind. Very soon, Tszyu might.
Tszyu, who was very impressed with Crawford's performance from last weekend, masterclass, Tszyu said. It was like watching a magician. That's what it felt like. And Errol Spence, he was all out of control. His balance was shot.
Now, you can expect the same people that were backing Errol Spence Jr. to win to all of a sudden become big Jaron Ennis fans, saying that he needs to fight Boots, not Tim.
Not him, even though comparatively, Tszyu brings more marquee value to the table than Jaron Ennis. You heard that right. Tim Tszyu has an entire country behind him. I don't know that everybody in Philadelphia even knows who Jaron Ennis is. They didn't know Stephen Fulton.
Just cut the fucking crap. Everybody in Philadelphia don't know who Jaron Ennis is, and surely not everyone in the country. Jaron Ennis is not in America what Tim Tszyu is in Australia.
Now, let's not pretend that Tim hasn't established himself as a world-class fighter, a world-class operator, a solid contender, the same, if not better, than Jaron Ennis at 154, at a higher weight. A Tim Tszyu fight for Terence Crawford is nothing to sneeze at.
It's a good fight, really good fight. Even better if it's for a title, and I'd wager that Tim brings more money to the table than Jaron Ennis does.
If Errol Spence Jr. decides to pass on activating his rematch clause, and he wants to take some time off to ease himself back into activity once he's fully recuperated, I don't see why Terence should move up in weight and take on Tim Tszyu.
In fact, I told you guys ahead of this weekend's fight that if Terence Crawford beats Errol Spence the way I think he's going to beat up Errol Spence, he might end up fighting Tim Tszyu.
Terence Crawford, who has declared that he will likely retire from boxing soon. I'm about to be 36, so I don't see myself continuing to box very much longer. I've been doing it for a long time. I always said I'm going to retire from boxing before I let boxing retire me.
Surely, the chance to be in a big fight, a bigger fight than a Boots fight, which would be little more than just a title defense.
A fight with Tim would afford Terence Crawford not only the opportunity to make more money at this stage in his career, but it would also afford him the opportunity to add even more to his already robust legacy. A 3-division, 3-time lineal, 3-time Ring Magazine, 2-time undisputed, could be a 4-division champion.
If he fights Tim.
I feel like Terence Crawford still has enough left at 36 years old because he takes care of himself between fights, because he lives like a fighter, acts like a fighter, that he could go up there and give Tim his first professional loss. It's not easy. It is a risky fight, a dangerous one, but one that yields rewards, at least more rewards than a Boots fight.
Well, what about all the people hyping up Boots?
Those are the same people that were hyping up Errol, and look how that worked out. So how do you think a Boots fight would work out? Timothy Bradley is right to ask, who the hell did Boots fight that people are so high on him?
I don't think he's a bad fighter.
But it's the same group of people who has a habit. It's the same group of people. It's always them that have a bad habit of slighting accomplished fighters, proven fighters, for unproven fighters.
It's always the same.
We've heard quite enough from them the last 5 years. I think Terence Crawford's next move should be fighting Tim Tszyu at 154.